This is Mr. H. You're listening to Masked Horror. The Disappearing Trick-or-Treater. Halloween night in our neighborhood always had this buzz, you know. Kids running around in costumes, adults trying to act scared by fake skeletons, that sort of thing. That night started like any other. I was handing out candy at the door when I noticed her. This little girl, maybe 6 or 7, in a princess costume, pink dress, sparkly tiara. She was adorable, skipping along with her pumpkin-shaped candy bucket. But what really caught my eye wasn't her. It was the man following a few feet behind her. He was in a mask, nothing too crazy, just a plain white mask with black holes for eyes. At first, I figured he was her dad, or maybe an older brother keeping an eye on her, but something felt off. I brushed it off, gave her a chocolate bar, and watched her head to the next house. But then, that was it. She didn't make it to the next door. I thought maybe she just went around the corner. Halloween's chaotic. You can lose track of people in seconds, but an hour later, I noticed a couple of police cruisers slowly driving through the streets. I figured it was just patrols, keeping an eye on things. But then more showed up, lights flashing, and it hit me. Something was wrong. Word spread fast. The little girl in the princess costume was missing. Her parents were frantic, going door to door, asking if anyone had seen her after she left their sight. I couldn't shake the image of that masked man. I told the police what I saw, and they nodded, but didn't seem too concerned. It was Halloween after all. Everyone was in a mask. Days went by and the search intensified. Flyers with her face plastered everywhere. Parents kept their kids inside, and the whole neighborhood was on edge. People whispered about the man in the mask, about strangers creeping through the streets. It wasn't long before the police asked for home security footage from the neighbors. That's when things took a turn. One house had a camera pointing toward the street. The footage showed the little girl walking down the sidewalk. A few seconds later, the masked man followed. But what was chilling was how he didn't walk up to her like I thought. He just stayed back, watching, until they disappeared off screen. It wasn't much to go on, but it wasn't enough to give the police a direction. A week after her disappearance, they found the masked man's car near a local park, abandoned. Inside were scraps of candy wrappers, some kids' toys, but no sign of the girl. It felt like a dead end. But then, something darker emerged. The more the police dug, the more they realized the situation wasn't what it seemed. The girl's uncle, a man who lived just a few towns over, had been around the neighborhood that night. No one thought anything of it. Families gathered for Halloween, right? But a few neighbors remembered seeing him earlier in the day, wearing a jacket that looked awfully similar to what the masked man had been wearing. The police connected the dots. It wasn't a random abduction. It was him. The realization sent chills down my spine. The man I saw following that little girl wasn't a stranger. He was someone she knew, someone her parents trusted. And Halloween gave him the perfect cover. He dressed in that mask, walking right behind her, in plain sight, because no one would suspect a family member, not on a night like that. Weeks passed, and a group of kids playing by the storm drains found something that sent a fresh wave of horror through the neighborhood. It was her shoes, those tiny, sparkly princess shoes, abandoned near the edge of a drain. It was as if she had been swallowed by the earth itself. They never found her, not her body, not her so-called trusted uncle who took her. It was like she had just vanished, leaving only those shoes as a cruel reminder. Her parents moved away not long after. No one could blame them. It's the kind of thing that sticks with you. But every Halloween since, when the streets fill with kids again, I can't help but see her. That little girl in the pink dress, followed by a man no one knew was already too close to her. The Masked Intruder. I've never been the type to scare easily, even on Halloween. I'd always figured it was just a night for costumes and candy. But last year, Halloween changed everything for me. It started like any other night. The trick-or-treaters had mostly come and gone, and I was about to turn off the porch light when I noticed someone standing just beyond the sidewalk. At first, I thought it was a kid waiting for their turn, but they were alone. They wore a plain Scream ghost mask, familiar, but just a bit unsettling. I waved politely, assuming it was a teenager messing around, but they didn't move. They just stood there, watching. I tried not to let it bother me, but something about it felt wrong. I locked the door, checked the windows, and told myself it was just a Halloween prank. An hour later, I glanced out the window again. He was still there. Same spot, same mask, standing beneath the streetlight. That's when the fear set in. I called the police, feeling silly, but I couldn't shake the unease. When they arrived, he was gone. They looked around the neighborhood, found nothing, and reassured me it was probably just some harmless prank. It's Halloween, they said. People do weird stuff. I tried to let it go. After the police left, I decided to stay at my friend Katie's house for the night. We had some wine, laughed about how paranoid I was being, and I slept in her guest room, thinking it would all seem silly by morning. But the next day was when things really got strange. I was getting ready for breakfast when I got a notification from my home security app. Motion detected inside the house. I stared at my phone, frozen. I was nowhere near my house, and no one was supposed to be there. I opened the security feed, scanning each room. The living room, empty. The kitchen, untouched. But then, something shifted on the screen. Movement near the attic door. My heart pounded. I immediately called the police, telling them there was someone in my house. When they arrived and searched the place, it seemed empty at first, but then they heard something from the attic, a creak, like someone shifting their weight. The officers climbed up, and there he was, the man in the mask. Only now, the mask was off, and he was crouched in the corner of my attic, surrounded by food wrappers, a sleeping bag, and some of my old things he had dragged up there. He'd been living in my house for days, maybe weeks, the police said. I learned later he was a homeless man who had likely slipped inside during some renovation work I had done. He'd been squatting in my attic, sneaking around when he got a chance. Worse still, they found knives hidden in his belongings, like he'd been planning something for that night, the night I called the police. If I hadn't gone to Katie's house, I don't know what would have happened, and even though they arrested him, I've never felt safe since. Knowing someone was living in my home, watching me from above, it stays with you. Every noise, every shadow feels like a threat. People think horror stories are just that, stories. But this was real, and it could happen to anyone. The real haunted house. We thought it was just a dumb Halloween dare. You know, the kind of thing teens do for a thrill. The old abandoned house at the end of our street had always been a local legend. People called it haunted, said weird things happened there, but none of us believed it. So on Halloween night, we decided to prove the rumors wrong. There were 5 of us: me, Liam, Chloe, Olivia, and Dylan. Dylan was always the brave one, pushing us to do stupid stuff. He was the one who dared us to break in. The house was as creepy as you'd expect. Boarded up windows, sagging roof, and the smell of damp rot in the air. But it wasn't the ghosts we were worried about. It was the homeless guy people said had been squatting there. We joked about it on the way in, saying if we ran into him, we'd just offer him some of our Halloween candy. Stupid, right? Everything was quiet at first. We walked through the house, laughing, taking videos, and daring each other to go into the basement. But then things started to get weird. Doors creaked open on their own, and the floor above us groaned, like someone was walking around. We tried to play it off as the wind or the old wood settling, but I could see the nervous glances we were all giving each other. Then we heard a crash from the basement. We all froze. Dylan, of course, insisted we check it out, so we went down the rickety steps. That's when we found the body. It was Dylan. He had gone ahead of us, laughing, and suddenly he was just gone. When we finally reached him, he was lying at the bottom of the stairs, his neck twisted at a horrible angle. He wasn't moving. We panicked. Chloe screamed, and we all bolted for the door, dragging her along. Once we made it outside, we called the police, barely able to get the words out. Someone had to have pushed Dylan. We were sure of it. That drifter we'd heard about must have been hiding down there. When the cops arrived, we led them back inside. But when they checked the basement, there was no sign of the drifter. In fact, the whole place was empty. No one had been living there, they said. What they did find, though, was something much worse. In the far corner of the basement, under a pile of debris, the police uncovered something that made my stomach turn. Bones. Human remains, long decayed but unmistakable. The smell had been faint, masked by the dampness of the house, but now it had filled the room. It wasn't just some local legend. This house had been the scene of a murder, and the body had been down there for years, forgotten. As the investigation deepened, the police uncovered something even more disturbing: old newspaper clippings, hidden in a box in the attic. They were about other deaths tied to the house, people who died under strange circumstances, always around Halloween, and always dismissed as accidents or natural causes. An overdose here, a suicide there, even a few disappearances. No one had ever connected the dots before, but it became clear this wasn't an isolated event. We never went back. No one in the town talks about it now, not openly, but every Halloween, I can't help but think about Dylan. I miss my friend. I can't help but to constantly think about how that house felt when we were in it. Like the air was thicker, like something didn't want us or all of us to leave. But the house is still there, still standing, despite plans to tear it down, like it's waiting for something or someone. Each year they delay the demolition. Each year it remains untouched, as if the town itself is too afraid to move forward. And every Halloween, as the leaves turn and the nights grow longer, I can't shake the feeling that the house isn't done. Not yet. It's still waiting, and I can't help but wonder who's next.